Imagine yourself standing in the heart of Manhattan at rush hour, surrounded by the relentless cacophony of honking taxis, construction noise, and the urgent chatter of millions pursuing their dreams. In this moment of urban chaos, you face a choice that ancient Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius understood deeply. Will you be controlled by the external storm, or will you master the fortress of your mind? Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the vast Roman Empire while simultaneously developing profound philosophical insights, once wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." These words, penned nearly 2,000 years ago in his personal journal, speak directly to the modern American experience. Whether you're navigating the competitive tech landscape of Silicon Valley, the financial pressures of Wall Street, or the creative struggles of Hollywood, the emperor's wisdom remains startlingly relevant. Consider Sarah, a marketing director in Chicago who discovered this truth during a particularly brutal quarterly review. As criticism flew across the conference room, she realized that her suffering wasn't caused by her boss's harsh words, but by her own internal narrative about those words. In that moment, she began to understand what the Stoics called the inner citadel, the impenetrable fortress of the mind that no external force can breach without our permission. This concept isn't merely philosophical poetry, it's a practical framework for thriving in contemporary America. When we master our inner citadel, we transform from reactive victims of circumstance into proactive architects of our experience. The Stoics understood that while we cannot control traffic jams, difficult colleagues, or economic downturns, we possess absolute sovereignty over our responses to these challenges. Today, we embark on a journey of quiet elimination, not through dramatic gestures or public declarations, but through the subtle, powerful practice of removing what no longer serves our highest good. This isn't about adding more to your already overwhelming schedule, it's about the liberating art of subtraction. As Seneca wisely noted, it is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much of it. The 11 practices we'll explore together represent a comprehensive system for reclaiming your mental real estate. Each elimination creates space for what truly matters: authentic relationships, meaningful work, and inner peace. This isn't passive consumption of information, it's an active transformation process that requires your full participation. Throughout this exploration, we'll visit the streets of America's greatest cities, meeting individuals who've applied these ancient principles to modern challenges. You'll discover how a Denver entrepreneur used Stoic wisdom to navigate a startup failure, how a Miami teacher transformed classroom chaos through emotional regulation, and how a Seattle software engineer found freedom from the validation trap. The path ahead demands courage, not the flashy bravery of social media posts, but the quiet heroism of daily practice. As we begin this journey together, remember that every master was once a beginner, and every expert was once a student willing to examine their life with unflinching honesty. Your transformation starts now, in this moment, with a single powerful recognition. You are the emperor of your inner world, and it's time to rule wisely. The discipline of desire, releasing others from your expectations. Meet David, a financial analyst in downtown Manhattan, who discovered the most liberating truth of his career on a rainy Tuesday morning. His former mentor, someone he trusted with confidential project details, had just taken credit for David's innovative trading algorithm in front of the entire executive board. As David sat in his cramped cubicle, heart pounding with betrayal and rage, he faced a choice that would define his professional future. Would he demand explanations, seek revenge, or choose a different path entirely? This scenario plays out thousands of times daily across American cities. In Los Angeles, creative professionals watch colleagues steal their ideas. In Chicago, friends betray confidences for personal gain. In Miami, business partners abandon ship during crucial moments. The natural human response involves lengthy confrontations, emotional explanations, and desperate attempts to make others understand our pain. Yet the ancient Stoics discovered a more powerful approach. Epictetus, who understood betrayal intimately as a former slave, taught what he called the discipline of desire, the practice of wanting only what is entirely within our control. When someone hurts us, our desire for their acknowledgement, apology, or understanding becomes a chain that binds us to their actions. David's breakthrough came when he realized he was giving his former mentor continued power over his emotional state by desperately wanting him to admit wrongdoing. Marcus Aurelius, writing from the battlefield, captured this wisdom perfectly. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. This isn't about passive acceptance or becoming a doormat. It's about strategic disengagement that preserves your energy for meaningful pursuits. When David's mentor later approached him asking for help on another project, David's response was simple and dignified. "I'm focusing my efforts elsewhere." No lengthy explanation, no dramatic confrontation, just clear boundaries delivered with quiet strength. Consider the psychological freedom this approach provides. Traditional responses to betrayal, angry emails, gossip sessions with colleagues, elaborate revenge fantasies, all require enormous emotional energy while keeping us psychologically tethered to those who've wronged us. The Stoic approach cuts these invisible chains through what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously choosing which thoughts and desires deserve our attention. Jennifer, a startup founder in Austin, applied this principle when her co-founder attempted to force her out of the company they'd built together. Instead of engaging in a public battle that would have destroyed both their reputations and the business, she quietly documented everything, consulted her lawyer, and focused on building strategic alliances with key investors. When her co-founder finally realized his isolation, Jennifer had already secured her position through competence rather than conflict. The discipline extends beyond professional betrayals to personal relationships. When romantic partners, family members, or close friends violate our trust, our instinct often involves detailed explanations of their impact on us. We craft lengthy texts, plan confrontational conversations, and seek validation from mutual friends. Yet these efforts rarely produce the healing we seek and often escalate conflicts unnecessarily. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The strength he references isn't physical power, but the profound peace that comes from releasing others from our expectations. When we stop requiring specific responses from those who've hurt us, we reclaim our emotional sovereignty. This doesn't mean avoiding all difficult conversations or failing to establish necessary boundaries. Rather, it means approaching these situations from a position of inner strength rather than a desperate need for external validation. The goal shifts from making others understand our pain to protecting our peace and moving forward with dignity. The practical application involves a simple question before any confrontation. Will this conversation serve my highest good, or am I simply seeking to transfer my pain to someone else? Often, the most powerful response to betrayal is the quiet demonstration of our values through subsequent actions rather than words. The art of subtraction, pruning life's unnecessary pursuits. Rachel stared at her vision board, mounted prominently above her desk in her San Francisco apartment. 27 goals stared back at her. Launch a podcast, learn Mandarin, run a marathon, start a side business, master photography, write a novel, learn to code, and 20 more ambitious pursuits. At 32, this marketing manager had accumulated goals like souvenirs, each representing a version of herself she thought she should become. Yet as she sat there on a foggy Sunday morning, exhausted from trying to juggle everything, she realized she was living everyone else's definition of success while losing sight of her own authentic path. This modern predicament would have been familiar to Seneca, who observed, "It is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much of it. The life we receive is not short, but we make it so. We are not ill-provided, but use what we have wastefully." The Roman philosopher understood that the abundance of choices in a prosperous society can become a burden rather than a blessing, leading us to scatter our energy across too many pursuits rather than focusing deeply on what truly matters. The art of subtraction requires what the Stoics called preferred indifference, the wisdom to distinguish between what we genuinely value and what we pursue because society, family, or social media suggests we should. Rachel's breakthrough came when she realized that half her goals originated from Instagram influencers, well-meaning family advice, and competitive colleagues rather than her own authentic desires. Consider the strategic importance of discretion in this process. When Rachel decided to quietly eliminate 15 goals from her list, she didn't announce her decision on social media or seek validation from friends. Marcus Aurelius, who managed the vast Roman Empire while pursuing philosophical wisdom, understood the power of strategic silence. The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. By keeping her pruning process private, Rachel avoided the external pressure to justify her choices and the inevitable opinions others would offer about her decisions. This principle applies powerfully in professional contexts. Michael, a software engineer in Seattle, spent 3 years pursuing a master's degree in business administration while working full-time, primarily because his father insisted it was necessary for advancement. When he finally acknowledged that his true passion lay in artificial intelligence research, he quietly withdrew from the MBA program and redirected that energy toward relevant certifications and projects. His colleagues never knew about the change, eliminating awkward explanations and unsolicited advice about his career trajectory. The Stoic approach to goal elimination involves what Epictetus called the discipline of action, aligning our activities with our fundamental values rather than external expectations. This requires honest self-examination about why we initially adopted certain goals. Were they authentic expressions of our values, or were they attempts to impress others, fulfill family expectations, or keep up with social media trends? Seneca provided practical guidance for this process. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. The elimination of unnecessary goals isn't failure. It's strategic resource allocation. When we spread ourselves across too many pursuits, we achieve mediocrity in many areas rather than excellence in few. The entrepreneur who tries to launch 5 businesses simultaneously rarely succeeds with any, while the focused entrepreneur who pours energy into one venture has a much higher probability of success. The subtraction process requires what modern psychology calls opportunity cost awareness, recognizing that every yes to one pursuit means no to countless others. Lisa, a graphic designer in Portland, realized that her commitment to learning 5 different design software programs was preventing her from mastering the 2 that were most relevant to her career goals. By quietly eliminating the unnecessary learning objectives, She freed up time to become genuinely expert in her chosen specialties. This approach extends beyond professional goals to personal pursuits. The Stoics understood that peace comes not from having more options, but from making clear choices aligned with our values. When we eliminate goals that don't serve our authentic selves, we create space for deeper engagement with what truly matters. The key lies in making these eliminations quietly and strategically. As Marcus Aurelius noted, confine yourself to the present. By focusing on what genuinely serves our present values and future authentic selves, we transform from scattered pursuers of others' dreams into focused architects of our own meaningful lives. The virtue of silence, protecting sacred boundaries. Amanda's finger hovered over the post button on Instagram. The carefully crafted message detailed every painful moment of her recent breakup with James, a relationship that had lasted 3 years and ended when she discovered his emotional affair with a coworker. Her 2,400 followers were waiting, and she could already imagine the supportive comments, the validation, the digital embrace of her online community. Yet something made her pause in her Brooklyn apartment that Tuesday evening, staring at the screen as the city hummed with life outside her window. This moment of hesitation would prove transformative, introducing Amanda to one of the most powerful Stoic principles, the virtue of silence in protecting what is sacred. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journal never intended for public consumption, understood deeply that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The emperor's strength came not from broadcasting his struggles, but from processing them internally with philosophical wisdom. The modern compulsion to share intimate details of relationship endings represents a fundamental misunderstanding of where healing occurs. When we transform private pain into public content, we inadvertently transfer our emotional processing to external validation systems. Amanda realized that her desire to post wasn't about healing, it was about seeking confirmation that James was wrong and she was right. This external validation, while temporarily satisfying, ultimately keeps us psychologically dependent on others' opinions rather than developing internal resilience. Consider the practical consequences of oversharing relationship details. Every piece of intimate information shared becomes a permanent digital record, accessible not only to current friends but to future employers, romantic partners, and professional contacts. Maria, a teacher in Denver, learned this lesson when details she'd shared about her divorce appeared in parent gossip circles, affecting her professional reputation and requiring uncomfortable conversations with her principal. The Stoic approach involves what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, wanting only what serves our highest good. When relationships end, our desire to be understood, validated, and vindicated can override our better judgment about privacy and dignity. The philosopher taught that true strength comes from processing difficult emotions internally rather than seeking external confirmation of our experience. This doesn't mean suffering in isolation or avoiding all support. The key distinction lies between seeking wisdom from trusted confidants and broadcasting intimate details for public consumption. Amanda eventually chose to have deep conversations with her sister and one close friend, people who knew both her and James, who could offer perspective rather than just validation and who would maintain confidentiality about sensitive details. The principle extends beyond romantic relationships to friendships, family conflicts, and professional disputes. Kevin, a marketing director in Chicago, faced this choice when his business partnership dissolved amid accusations of financial impropriety. His initial instinct involved detailed LinkedIn posts explaining his side of the story, but he chose instead to handle the matter through legal channels while maintaining public dignity. This approach preserved his professional reputation and allowed for potential reconciliation once emotions cooled. Marcus Aurelius understood that true power comes from controlling our responses rather than controlling others' perceptions. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. When we resist the urge to publicly detail others' wrongdoings, we demonstrate strength rather than victimhood. This approach often proves more persuasive than lengthy explanations, as people respect those who handle difficulties with grace and discretion. The practice requires developing what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously choosing which thoughts and impulses deserve our attention and action. When the urge to overshare arises, we can pause and ask, will sharing this information serve my healing process, or am I seeking external validation for internal work that only I can do? Social media platforms profit from our emotional vulnerability, encouraging oversharing through algorithms that reward dramatic personal content with increased engagement. The Stoic response involves recognizing these systems for what they are: external forces designed to monetize our private experiences, and choosing to maintain sovereignty over our personal narratives. The virtue of silence creates space for genuine healing to occur. When we process relationship endings privately, we develop internal resources for future challenges rather than becoming dependent on external validation. This approach builds character, preserves dignity, and often leads to healthier future relationships built on authentic connection rather than shared grievances against past partners. Temperance in Turbulence, the power of measured response. The conference room in downtown Atlanta felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Thomas, a project manager at a major consulting firm, watched as his team's 6 months of work were being systematically dismantled by the client's new director, who had clearly decided to flex his authority regardless of the project's merit. Around the table, voices were rising, accusations were flying, and Thomas felt his heart pounding with a familiar cocktail of frustration and indignation. His natural instinct screamed to match the escalating volume, to defend his team's efforts with the same aggressive energy being directed at them. Yet in that crucial moment, he remembered the words of Heraclitus: "To be even-minded is the greatest virtue." This ancient wisdom, born from observing the constant flux of human emotions and circumstances, speaks directly to one of modern America's greatest challenges: maintaining composure in increasingly volatile environments. Whether facing road rage on Los Angeles freeways, heated political discussions at family gatherings, or aggressive behavior in professional settings, our ability to respond with measured calm rather than reactive emotion often determines the trajectory of our relationships and reputation. The Stoic understanding of emotional regulation goes far deeper than simply keeping your cool. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded Roman legions while managing the pressures of empire, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This emperor understood that true power lies not in dominating others through volume or aggression, but in maintaining inner equilibrium regardless of external chaos. Consider the neurological reality of what happens when we raise our voices in anger. The amygdala hijacks our prefrontal cortex, flooding our system with stress hormones that impair judgment and escalate conflict. Sarah, an emergency room nurse in Phoenix, learned this lesson during a particularly challenging shift when a patient's family member began screaming about wait times. Her initial impulse was to respond with equal intensity, but she instead lowered her voice, spoke slowly, and maintained steady eye contact. The family member's aggression deflated within minutes, replaced by cooperation and eventual gratitude. This principle extends beyond professional contexts to personal relationships. During a heated argument with his teenage daughter about curfew violations, Michael, a single father in Seattle, felt his anger rising to match her defiant shouting. Instead of escalating, he sat down, lowered his voice to barely above a whisper, and said, "I can see you're upset. Help me understand what's really going on." This unexpected response broke through her defensive barriers, leading to a productive conversation about peer pressure and her fears about fitting in at her new school. The Stoics understood that our emotional responses create ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate situation. When we respond to aggression with aggression, we perpetuate cycles of conflict that can damage relationships for years. Conversely, when we respond to chaos with calm, we often defuse situations that could have escalated into lasting damage. Epictetus, who endured slavery and physical abuse, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. This doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, but rather choosing our responses based on wisdom rather than emotion. The practical application involves what modern psychology calls emotional regulation, the ability to pause between stimulus and response. When Lisa, a real estate agent in Miami, faced an irate client who was screaming about a delayed closing, she took 3 deep breaths before responding. This brief pause allowed her prefrontal cortex to regain control, enabling her to address the client's concerns professionally while maintaining her dignity and ultimately saving the deal. Ancient Stoics practiced what they called the view from above, imagining how current conflicts would appear from a broader perspective. Will this argument matter in 5 years? Will raising my voice solve the underlying problem or simply create new ones? This perspective shift often reveals that our immediate emotional reactions, while understandable, rarely serve our long-term interests. The power of measured response extends to digital communications, where the absence of tone and body language can amplify misunderstandings. Before sending that angry email or posting that heated social media response, the Stoic approach involves pausing to consider, will this response move the situation toward resolution or simply escalate the conflict? Seneca observed that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When we choose measured responses over reactive outbursts, we end cycles of escalation and begin new patterns of respectful communication. This transformation requires practice and patience, but the results, stronger relationships, enhanced reputation, and inner peace, justify the effort required to master this essential skill. The practice of benevolence, guarding your words. The break room at the downtown Chicago marketing agency buzzed with familiar energy as Monday morning coffee rituals unfolded. Jennifer, a senior account manager, found herself surrounded by colleagues dissecting the weekend's drama involving their mutual friend Alex, who had recently been passed over for a promotion. The conversation quickly turned venomous. Alex was too aggressive, politically tone-deaf, and probably better suited for a smaller company anyway. As Jennifer listened, she felt the familiar pull to contribute her own observations about Alex's shortcomings. After all, she had witnessed some of Alex's more challenging moments firsthand. Yet something made her pause, remembering a question that had been haunting her lately. What kind of person do I become when I speak about others in their absence? This moment of self-reflection represents a crucial intersection between ancient Stoic wisdom and modern social dynamics. The practice of benevolence, actively choosing kindness and understanding over criticism and judgment, requires what Marcus Aurelius called sympathia, the recognition that we are all interconnected parts of a larger human community. When we speak negatively about others, we don't just damage their reputation, we corrode our own character and contribute to a culture of mistrust and cynicism. The Stoic understanding of human nature acknowledges that everyone we encounter is fighting battles we cannot see. Alex, the colleague being discussed in that Chicago break room, was actually struggling with his mother's recent cancer diagnosis while trying to maintain professional performance. His aggressive behavior stemmed from stress and fear, not arrogance. His political tone-deafness reflected his distraction with family concerns, not professional incompetence. Yet none of his critics possessed this context, making their judgments both unfair and ultimately meaningless. Epictetus, who understood suffering intimately through his experience as a slave, taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. This wisdom applies particularly to situations where we're tempted to share negative opinions about others. The discipline involves asking ourselves, is what I'm about to say true, necessary, and kind? If the answer to any of these questions is no, silence becomes the wiser choice. Consider the practical consequences of negative speech patterns. When Maria, a software engineer in Austin, regularly participated in office gossip about underperforming colleagues, she gradually became known as someone who couldn't be trusted with sensitive information. Potential mentors avoided confiding in her, collaboration opportunities decreased, and her professional network contracted rather than expanded. The short-term social bonding that gossip provides ultimately damaged her long-term career prospects. The alternative approach requires what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously choosing which thoughts deserve expression. When conversation turns negative, we can redirect toward more constructive topics or simply excuse ourselves. Jennifer's breakthrough came when she began responding to negative comments with questions that encouraged empathy. I wonder what might be going on in Alex's life right now, or have you considered talking directly with Alex about your concerns? These responses often shifted group dynamics from criticism toward understanding. This principle extends beyond workplace dynamics to social media interactions where the distance and anonymity of digital platforms can amplify our worst impulses. David, a freelance graphic designer in Portland, realized he had developed a habit of posting sarcastic comments about public figures and local politicians. While these posts generated likes and shares from like-minded followers, they also created a digital footprint that potential clients might find off-putting. More importantly, he noticed that this negative online behavior was affecting his offline relationships, making him more cynical and judgmental in person. The Stoic practice of benevolence doesn't require naive optimism or the suppression of legitimate concerns about others' behavior. Rather, it involves channeling those concerns through constructive channels. When Lisa, a teacher in Denver, noticed a colleague struggling with classroom management, she chose direct, private conversation over break room complaints. This approach not only preserved her colleague's dignity but also created an opportunity for meaningful professional support. Marcus Aurelius understood that our words reveal our character more than they reveal truth about others. The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like your enemy. When we choose empathy over criticism, understanding over judgment, we demonstrate strength rather than weakness. This approach often proves more persuasive than negative commentary, as people naturally gravitate toward those who speak with kindness and wisdom. The practice requires developing what modern psychology calls emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize and manage our own emotions while understanding others' perspectives. When we feel the urge to share negative opinions, we can pause and ask, what need am I trying to meet through this criticism? Am I seeking connection, validation, or simply releasing frustration? Often, addressing these underlying needs directly proves more satisfying than indirect criticism of others. The transformation from criticism to benevolence creates ripple effects that extend far beyond individual relationships. When we consistently choose kind speech over negative commentary, we contribute to environments where trust flourishes, creativity emerges, and authentic collaboration becomes possible. The discipline of assent, embracing your unique path. At 3 a.m. on a sleepless Tuesday night in her Manhattan studio apartment, Rachel found herself deep in the rabbit hole of Instagram success stories. Her phone screen illuminated faces of former college classmates who seemed to be living impossibly perfect lives. Sarah's promotion to partner at a prestigious law firm, complete with corner office photos. Mike's third startup acquisition, celebrated with champagne on a private yacht. Jessica's engagement to a doctor, featuring a ring that probably cost more than Rachel's annual rent. As a freelance graphic designer struggling to build her client base, Rachel felt the familiar ache of inadequacy wash over her. Why wasn't she achieving these milestones? What was wrong with her path? This midnight spiral of comparison represents one of modern America's most pervasive psychological traps. Social media platforms have weaponized our natural tendency to measure ourselves against others, creating endless opportunities for what psychologists call compare and despair cycles. Yet this challenge isn't new. It's a fundamental human tendency that the ancient Stoics understood and addressed through what Epictetus called the discipline of assent, the practice of consciously choosing which thoughts and judgments deserve our mental energy. Epictetus, who rose from slavery to become one of history's most influential philosophers, taught that control your perceptions, direct your actions properly, willingly accept what's outside your control. This wisdom speaks directly to our comparison addiction. When we constantly measure our behind-the-scenes reality against others' highlight reels, we're essentially comparing our rough drafts to their published works, our struggles to their successes, our internal experience to their external presentation. The discipline of assent requires recognizing that comparison is not just unproductive but fundamentally illogical. Consider the variables at play in any life comparison: family background, educational opportunities, health circumstances, geographic location, economic timing, personal relationships, and countless other factors that shape individual trajectories. When James, a teacher in Phoenix, compared his salary to his investment banker brother's income, he initially felt inadequate until he considered the complete picture: his brother's 80-hour work weeks, constant travel, health problems from stress, and deteriorating marriage. James's path offered different rewards: meaningful work, strong family relationships, and personal fulfillment that weren't visible in salary comparisons. The Stoic approach involves what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above, stepping back to see our lives from a broader perspective. Rachel's breakthrough came when she realized that her Instagram comparison habit was like judging a movie by watching random 5-second clips from different films. She had no context for the struggles, sacrifices, or unhappiness that might exist behind those polished posts. More importantly, she was allowing others' choices to define her sense of self-worth rather than focusing on her own values and progress. This principle extends beyond social media to professional environments where comparison can be equally destructive. When Lisa, a marketing coordinator in Seattle, constantly compared her career progress to colleagues who seemed to advance faster, she missed opportunities to develop her unique strengths. Her turning point came when she shifted focus from external benchmarks to internal growth metrics. Was she learning new skills? Building meaningful relationships? Contributing value to her team? These questions revealed significant progress that external comparisons had obscured. The discipline requires developing what Seneca called the therapy of assent, actively choosing which thoughts deserve our attention and energy. When comparison thoughts arise, we can pause and ask, is this thought helping me grow, or is it simply making me feel inadequate? Often, the answer reveals that comparison thoughts serve no constructive purpose and can be dismissed without further engagement. Practical application involves creating what modern psychology calls internal reference points, measuring progress against our past selves rather than other people. Michael, a freelance writer in Denver, began keeping a monthly journal documenting his professional growth, client relationships, and creative projects. This practice revealed steady progress that daily comparison to more established writers had hidden. His confidence grew as he focused on his trajectory rather than others' current positions. The Stoics understood that everyone's path unfolds according to different timing and circumstances. Marcus Aurelius didn't become emperor until age 40 after years of preparation and unexpected circumstances. Seneca faced exile and political setbacks before achieving influence. Epictetus endured slavery before gaining freedom to teach. Their wisdom emerged partly from understanding that meaningful lives rarely follow linear or comparable trajectories. The transformation from comparison to self-acceptance requires what Epictetus called preferred indifference, recognizing that external achievements, while potentially pleasant, don't determine our worth or happiness. When we stop measuring ourselves against others' milestones, we create space to appreciate our unique contributions, relationships, and experiences. This shift from external validation to internal compass creates profound freedom. Instead of constantly adjusting our goals based on others' achievements, we can pursue paths aligned with our values, interests, and circumstances. Rachel eventually deleted Instagram from her phone and began measuring success by client satisfaction, creative growth, and work-life balance rather than external recognition or financial comparisons. Digital temperance, mindful engagement with virtual worlds. The notification sound pierced through Sarah's concentration for the 15th time that morning. As a content strategist working from her Boston apartment, she had intended to spend the morning crafting a crucial client presentation. Instead, she found herself trapped in an endless cycle of checking Instagram stories, responding to LinkedIn messages, scrolling through Twitter debates, and refreshing her email inbox. By noon, she had accomplished virtually nothing productive while feeling simultaneously overstimulated and empty. This digital treadmill had become her daily reality, leaving her exhausted by evening despite having barely engaged with the physical world around her. Sarah's experience reflects a modern epidemic that would have fascinated the ancient Stoics, the voluntary surrender of our most precious resource, attention, to systems designed to capture and monetize it. Marcus Aurelius, who understood the importance of mental discipline in governing both himself and the Roman Empire, wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This wisdom takes on profound relevance in an age where digital platforms profit by fragmenting our attention across infinite streams of information, most of which serve no meaningful purpose in our actual lives. The Stoic concept of preferred indifference applies powerfully to social media consumption. While these platforms can provide genuine value, maintaining distant friendships, accessing educational content, building professional networks, they become destructive when we engage mindlessly rather than intentionally. The key lies in what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously choosing which digital experiences deserve our mental energy and which serve merely as distractions from meaningful living. Consider the psychological mechanics of social media addiction. These platforms employ what behavioral psychologists call variable ratio reinforcement schedules, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Each scroll might reveal something interesting, funny, or validating, creating a dopamine-driven feedback loop that hijacks our brain's reward system. Michael, a software engineer in San Francisco, realized he was checking his phone over 200 times daily, fragmenting his attention so severely that he couldn't focus on complex coding problems for more than 10 minutes at a time. The Stoic response involves creating what Epictetus would call disciplined practices around digital engagement. Rather than allowing notifications to dictate our attention throughout the day, we can establish specific times for social media interaction, treating it like any other scheduled activity. Lisa, a teacher in Chicago, began checking social media only during her lunch break and for 30 minutes after dinner. This simple boundary restored her ability to engage deeply with lesson planning, student interactions, and personal relationships. The practice extends beyond time management to intentional consumption. Before opening any social media app, the Stoic approach involves asking, what specific purpose does this serve right now? Are we seeking connection with specific people, information about particular topics, or inspiration for creative projects? Or are we simply avoiding boredom, procrastinating on important tasks, or seeking validation through likes and comments? Marcus Aurelius understood that our mental diet shapes our character as surely as our physical diet affects our health. When we consume endless streams of outrage, comparison, and superficial content, we gradually become more anxious, envious, and disconnected from our authentic selves. Conversely, when we curate our digital consumption to include educational content, inspiring stories, and meaningful connections, we support our growth and well-being. The principle of digital temperance also involves recognizing the difference between connection and consumption. Genuine social media engagement involves meaningful interaction with specific people, commenting thoughtfully on friends' posts, sharing resources that might help others, or maintaining relationships across geographic distances. Mindless consumption involves passive scrolling through algorithmic feeds designed to capture attention rather than facilitate authentic connection. Jennifer, a marketing manager in Denver, transformed her relationship with LinkedIn by shifting from passive consumption to active contribution. Instead of scrolling through her feed comparing herself to others' career announcements, she began sharing insights from her work experience and engaging meaningfully with colleagues' posts. This change not only reduced her social media anxiety but also strengthened her professional network and established her as a thought leader in her field. The Stoics understood that true freedom comes from choosing our responses rather than being controlled by external stimuli. In the digital age, this means developing what modern psychology calls metacognition, awareness of our own thought processes and behavioral patterns. When we notice ourselves reaching for our phones out of habit rather than intention, we can pause and ask, what am I really seeking right now? Connection, information, distraction, or validation? Often, this pause reveals that our digital impulses mask deeper needs that technology cannot satisfy. The urge to check social media when feeling lonely might be better addressed by calling a friend or joining a local community group. The compulsion to scroll when feeling anxious might be better managed through meditation, exercise, or engaging with nature. Seneca observed that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When we end mindless digital consumption, we begin reclaiming time and attention for activities that genuinely enrich our lives, deep conversations, creative projects, physical activities, and quiet reflection. The goal isn't to eliminate technology, but to ensure it serves our values rather than undermining them. The transformation requires patience and self-compassion, as digital habits often develop unconsciously over the years. Yet the rewards, improved focus, reduced anxiety, stronger relationships, and greater life satisfaction justify the effort required to establish healthier boundaries with our virtual worlds. The fortress of self-worth, liberation from external approval. The fluorescent lights of the Miami advertising agency buzzed overhead as Elena sat in the conference room, her heart racing with anticipation. She had just presented her most innovative campaign concept to the senior partners, a bold, creative approach that she genuinely believed could revolutionize their clients' brand positioning. As the partners exchanged glances and whispered among themselves, Elena felt her self-worth hanging in the balance of their verdict. Would they approve? Would they praise her creativity? Would this finally be the moment that proved her value to the company? In that suspended moment, Elena realized she had become a prisoner of external validation, her entire sense of professional identity dependent on others' opinions rather than her own authentic assessment of her work. This scenario plays out countless times daily across American workplaces, social gatherings, and family dinners. We present ourselves like actors on a stage, constantly scanning the audience for approval, applause, or validation. Yet this exhausting performance comes at an enormous psychological cost as we gradually lose touch with our authentic selves while becoming increasingly dependent on others' ever-changing opinions for our sense of worth. Marcus Aurelius, who held the ultimate position of external validation as Roman emperor, understood this trap intimately. Despite commanding the respect of millions, he wrote in his private journal how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. The emperor recognized that true strength comes from internal validation rather than external approval, from knowing our own values and living according to them regardless of others' reactions. The modern validation trap has been amplified by social media platforms that quantify approval through likes, shares, and comments. Consider David, a freelance photographer in Portland who found himself crafting Instagram posts based on what would generate the most engagement rather than what represented his authentic artistic vision. His work gradually shifted from meaningful personal expression to algorithm-optimized content designed to please an invisible audience. The irony was stark. In seeking widespread approval, he had abandoned the unique perspective that made his work valuable in the first place. The Stoic concept of the inner citadel offers a powerful alternative to this external validation cycle. Epictetus, who understood powerlessness intimately through his experience as a slave, taught that we possess absolute sovereignty over our internal responses regardless of external circumstances. This doesn't mean ignoring feedback or becoming arrogant, but rather developing an internal compass that guides our decisions based on our values rather than others' approval. The transformation begins with what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously examining our motivations before making decisions. Elena's breakthrough came when she began asking herself before each presentation, am I proposing this idea because I believe it serves the client's best interests, or because I think it will impress my colleagues? This simple question revealed how often her professional choices were driven by validation seeking rather than authentic conviction. The principle extends beyond professional contexts to personal relationships, where the approval trap can be equally destructive. Jennifer, a teacher in Seattle, realized she had been saying yes to every social invitation, volunteer opportunity, and family request, not because she genuinely wanted to participate, but because she feared disappointing others. This people-pleasing pattern left her exhausted and resentful while preventing others from knowing her authentic preferences and boundaries. Breaking free from external validation requires developing what psychologists call internal locus of control, the belief that our worth and happiness come primarily from our own actions and choices rather than others' reactions. This shift involves celebrating personal growth, effort, and alignment with values rather than external recognition or approval. Marcus Aurelius practiced this principle through what he called the view from above, imagining how current validation seeking would appear from a broader perspective. Will this person's approval matter in 5 years? Am I compromising my integrity for temporary praise? Am I making decisions based on fear of disapproval rather than authentic conviction? The practical application involves creating what modern psychology calls internal reference points, measuring success against our own values and growth rather than others' opinions. Michael, a startup founder in Austin, began evaluating business decisions based on whether they aligned with his company's mission and values rather than whether they would impress investors or competitors. This shift led to more authentic strategic choices and, paradoxically, greater external success as his authentic vision attracted aligned partners and customers. The liberation from external approval doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others' needs or feedback. Rather, it involves developing the confidence to consider others' input without being controlled by it. We can appreciate praise without depending on it, accept criticism without being devastated by it, and make decisions based on our authentic assessment rather than anticipated reactions. Epictetus taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. This applies powerfully to validation-seeking behavior. When we depend on others' approval for our self-worth, we give them power to hurt us through withholding that approval. Conversely, when we develop internal validation systems, we become emotionally resilient while maintaining the capacity for meaningful relationships. The fortress of self-worth isn't built through arrogance or isolation, but through the patient cultivation of self-knowledge, value alignment, and authentic expression. When we know who we are and what we stand for, others' opinions become interesting data points rather than determinants of our worth. This transformation creates space for genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than performance and validation seeking. The journey requires courage, as stepping off the validation treadmill often means disappointing people who have grown accustomed to our people-pleasing patterns. Yet the freedom that emerges, the ability to make authentic choices, express genuine opinions, and live according to our values, represents one of life's most profound liberations. The wisdom of imperfection, embracing human limitation. The deadline loomed like a storm cloud over Jessica's cramped Los Angeles apartment as she stared at her laptop screen for the fourth consecutive hour, paralyzed by a single paragraph that refused to meet her impossibly high standards. As a freelance marketing copywriter, she had rewritten the same product description 17 times, each iteration feeling inadequate compared to the flawless vision in her mind. Her client expected the project by midnight, but Jessica couldn't bring herself to submit work that wasn't absolutely perfect. This familiar pattern had cost her clients before, not because her work was poor, but because her pursuit of perfection often meant missing deadlines entirely, leaving clients frustrated and Jessica consumed by anxiety and self-doubt. This perfectionist trap represents one of modern society's most paralyzing psychological patterns. In a culture that celebrates flawless Instagram feeds, spotless LinkedIn profiles, and seamless professional presentations, we've forgotten a fundamental truth that the ancient Stoics understood deeply. Human limitation isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature that enables growth, learning, and authentic connection with others. Marcus Aurelius, despite holding ultimate power as Roman emperor, filled his personal journal with observations about his own mistakes, limitations, and areas for improvement. He wrote, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present: I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world?" The emperor understood that being human means being imperfect and that our limitations provide the very context that makes growth possible. The modern perfectionism epidemic stems partly from what psychologists call compare and despair cycles, where we measure our internal experience against others' external presentations. Consider the social media effect. We see others' highlight reels while intimately knowing our own behind-the-scenes struggles. This creates an illusion that everyone else has figured out how to live flawlessly while we alone struggle with mistakes, setbacks, and imperfections. Seneca, who experienced both tremendous success and devastating failure during his lifetime, offered profound wisdom about embracing imperfection. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Our mistakes and limitations aren't obstacles to overcome but essential components of the learning process. When we try to eliminate all possibility of error, we also eliminate the possibility of growth, innovation, and authentic achievement. The Stoic approach to imperfection involves what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, wanting what is actually possible rather than chasing impossible standards. This doesn't mean lowering our aspirations, but rather understanding the difference between excellence and perfection. Excellence involves doing our best within current circumstances and capabilities, while perfection demands flawless outcomes that exist only in imagination. David, a software engineer in Seattle, discovered this distinction when his perfectionist tendencies began paralyzing his coding productivity. He would spend days perfecting individual functions instead of building working prototypes that could be tested and improved. His breakthrough came when he adopted what programmers call minimum viable product thinking, creating functional solutions that could be refined through iteration rather than attempting perfect solutions from the start. The wisdom of imperfection extends beyond professional contexts to personal relationships, where perfectionist expectations can be equally destructive. Maria, a teacher in Chicago, realized she was avoiding dating entirely because she felt she needed to achieve perfect physical fitness, financial stability, and emotional maturity before being worthy of love. This impossible standard kept her isolated while preventing her from experiencing the growth that comes through authentic relationship challenges. Marcus Aurelius understood that perfectionism often masks fear of judgment or failure. When we demand perfection from ourselves, we're usually trying to control others' perceptions rather than focusing on genuine improvement. The emperor wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. True strength comes from accepting our current capabilities while working steadily toward improvement, not from pretending we've already achieved impossible standards. The practical application involves what modern psychology calls self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness we'd offer a good friend facing similar challenges. When Jessica finally submitted her copywriting project with minor imperfections intact, she discovered that her client was delighted with work that met their needs effectively, even though it didn't match her internal vision of perfection. Epictetus, who understood limitation intimately through his physical disabilities, taught that our constraints often become our greatest teachers. When we accept our current limitations while working within them, we often discover creative solutions that wouldn't have emerged through perfectionist approaches. The Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection, aligns closely with Stoic wisdom about embracing human limitation as a source of authenticity rather than shame. The transformation from perfectionism to excellence requires redefining success as progress rather than flawless outcomes. Michael, a graphic designer in Denver, began measuring success by client satisfaction and creative growth rather than his own impossible aesthetic standards. This shift reduced his anxiety while actually improving his work quality, as he could focus on solving client problems rather than achieving imaginary perfection. The Stoics understood that our imperfections connect us to our shared humanity. When we pretend to be flawless, we isolate ourselves from others who are also struggling with limitations and mistakes. Conversely, when we acknowledge our imperfections while working steadily toward improvement, we create space for authentic relationships and genuine learning. The wisdom of imperfection ultimately teaches us that our limitations aren't obstacles to overcome, but essential aspects of the human experience that enable growth, empathy, and authentic connection. When we embrace this truth, we transform from anxious perfectionists into confident learners, ready to engage fully with life's messy, imperfect, and ultimately beautiful reality. The reality principle: aligning expectations with nature. At 35, Mark stood in his Phoenix apartment staring at the vision board he'd created 5 years earlier. feeling the weight of unfulfilled dreams pressing down on his chest like desert heat. The board displayed images of a corner office in Manhattan, a Tesla Model S, a wedding ring, and a house with a white picket fence. All the markers of success he'd believed would materialize by this age. Instead, he was working as a mid-level marketing coordinator, driving a 10-year-old Honda, was recently divorced, and was living in a one-bedroom rental. The gap between his expectations and reality had become a source of constant disappointment, leaving him feeling like a failure despite having a stable job, good health, and meaningful friendships that many would envy. Mark's struggle illustrates one of modern life's most pervasive sources of suffering: the chasm between our expectations and reality. We craft elaborate life scripts based on societal messages, family pressures, and media representations, then measure our worth against these fictional timelines. The ancient Stoics understood this trap intimately and developed powerful tools for aligning our expectations with what they called nature, the actual conditions and constraints of human existence, rather than our fantasies about how life should unfold. Marcus Aurelius, despite achieving the pinnacle of worldly success as Roman emperor, wrote extensively about the importance of accepting life's inherent unpredictability. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate associates you. This wasn't passive resignation, but active wisdom, understanding that our expectations must be grounded in reality rather than wishful thinking if we want to experience genuine satisfaction and peace. The modern expectation trap has been amplified by what psychologists call social comparison theory and the fundamental attribution error. We see others' successes while remaining blind to their struggles, failures, and the role of luck in their achievements. We attribute our own setbacks to personal failings while assuming others' success comes from superior character or ability. This creates unrealistic expectations about what we should achieve and when we should achieve it. Consider the career expectations that plague many American professionals. Sarah, a journalist in Portland, spent her 20s expecting to become a senior editor at a major publication by 30, based on success stories she'd read about industry leaders. When layoffs hit the media industry and she found herself freelancing to make ends meet, she felt like a failure despite producing excellent work and building a loyal readership. Her expectations hadn't accounted for economic realities, industry changes, or the simple fact that career trajectories rarely follow linear paths. The Stoic approach involves what Epictetus called preferred indifference, recognizing that external outcomes, while potentially pleasant, aren't necessary for our happiness or worth. This doesn't mean abandoning all goals, but rather holding them lightly, understanding that our fulfillment comes from our efforts and character rather than specific achievements. When we align our expectations with this reality, we can pursue meaningful goals without being devastated by setbacks or delays. Seneca, who experienced both tremendous wealth and political exile, understood the importance of preparing mentally for various outcomes. What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This wasn't pessimism but practical wisdom. When we expect life to include challenges, setbacks, and unexpected changes, we're better equipped to handle them with grace and resilience. The principle extends beyond career expectations to relationships, where unrealistic standards can destroy otherwise healthy connections. Jennifer, a teacher in Miami, entered her marriage expecting constant happiness, perfect communication, and effortless compatibility. When normal relationship challenges arose, disagreements about money, different communication styles, and the stress of balancing work and family. She interpreted these as signs of fundamental incompatibility rather than normal aspects of long-term partnership. The Stoic understanding of human nature provides a more realistic foundation for relationship expectations. People are complex, imperfect, and constantly changing. Relationships require ongoing effort, compromise, and forgiveness. When we expect these realities rather than fairy tale perfection, we can appreciate the genuine love and support that exists while working constructively through inevitable challenges. Marcus Aurelius practiced what he called the view from above, imagining how current disappointments would appear from a broader perspective. The promotion we didn't get, the relationship that ended, the financial goal we missed. How significant will these seem in 10 years? This perspective shift often reveals that our disappointment stems from arbitrary timelines and social expectations rather than genuine loss. The practical application involves what modern psychology calls flexible goal adjustment, regularly reassessing our expectations based on changing circumstances, new information, and evolving values. David, a software engineer in Seattle, had expected to become a startup founder by 35, but discovered through experience that he preferred the stability and work-life balance of employment. Rather than viewing this as a failure, he adjusted his expectations to align with his authentic preferences and found greater satisfaction in his current role. The reality principle also involves accepting what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, wanting what is possible rather than chasing fantasies. This doesn't mean limiting our aspirations, but rather grounding them in a realistic assessment of our circumstances, abilities, and the factors beyond our control that influence outcomes. Epictetus taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. When our expectations align with reality, including the reality that life includes setbacks, delays, and unexpected changes, we can respond to challenges with resilience rather than despair. We can celebrate genuine achievements without being crushed by unmet expectations. The transformation from unrealistic expectations to aligned reality requires what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously examining our assumptions about how life should unfold and adjusting them based on wisdom rather than wishful thinking. When Mark finally removed his vision board and began appreciating his actual life, meaningful work, good health, supportive friendships, and the freedom to pursue new opportunities, he discovered a satisfaction that had been hidden beneath layers of unmet expectations. The sacred trust, honoring human dignity in speech. The Nashville music industry gathering buzzed with the familiar energy of networking, deal-making, and career positioning as songwriter Emma found herself in a circle of industry professionals discussing a mutual acquaintance who had recently lost a major recording contract. The conversation quickly turned toxic. Stories about the artist's alleged substance abuse, speculation about personal relationships, and whispered theories about career self-sabotage. Emma felt the familiar pull to contribute her own observations. After all, she had witnessed some concerning behavior firsthand, and sharing insider knowledge would certainly elevate her status within this influential group. Yet, as she opened her mouth to speak, a question flashed through her mind that would fundamentally change how she engaged with others. What kind of person do I become when I treat someone's private struggles as entertainment for others? This moment of moral clarity represents a crossroads that appears countless times in our daily lives. In office break rooms across America, at dinner parties in suburban homes, And in digital comment sections, we face the choice between honoring human dignity through our speech or participating in the casual destruction of others' reputations through gossip, speculation, and negative commentary. The ancient Stoics understood that our words reveal our character more than they reveal truth about others, and that choosing dignity in speech represents one of the highest forms of virtue. Marcus Aurelius, who could have destroyed anyone's reputation with a single word, chose instead to focus on his own character development. He wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like your enemy." This wisdom applies powerfully to gossip situations. When we resist the temptation to tear others down through our words, we demonstrate strength rather than weakness, character rather than pettiness. The modern gossip epidemic has been amplified by social media platforms that reward inflammatory content with increased engagement. Consider the psychological mechanics at play. Sharing negative information about others provides temporary social bonding through shared judgment, offers the illusion of moral superiority, and creates momentary entertainment that distracts from our own challenges. Yet these short-term benefits come at enormous long-term costs to our character, relationships, and community trust. The Stoic understanding of human interconnectedness provides a powerful framework for evaluating our speech choices. Epictetus taught that we are all part of a larger human community, connected by our shared struggles, hopes, and fundamental dignity. When we participate in gossip, we don't just damage the person being discussed. We corrode the social fabric that supports all of us. We contribute to environments where trust becomes impossible and authentic vulnerability becomes dangerous. Consider the practical consequences of gossip participation. When Michael, a marketing manager in Chicago, regularly engaged in office gossip about colleagues' personal lives and professional struggles, he gradually became known as someone who couldn't be trusted with sensitive information. Potential mentors avoided confiding in him, collaboration opportunities decreased, and his professional network contracted rather than expanded. The temporary social connection that gossip provided ultimately isolated him from the meaningful relationships that support career growth and personal fulfillment. The alternative approach requires what Seneca called the therapy of assent, consciously choosing which thoughts and impulses deserve expression. When conversation turns toward negative commentary about others, we can redirect toward more constructive topics, excuse ourselves from the discussion, or even gently challenge the direction with questions that encourage empathy rather than judgment. Emma's transformation in the Nashville music scene began when she started responding to gossip with questions like, "I wonder what kind of pressure he must be under right now," or "Have any of us reached out to see if he needs support?" These responses often shifted group dynamics from criticism toward compassion, revealing that many people participate in gossip not because they enjoy hurting others, but because they don't know how to redirect conversations toward more positive directions. The principle extends beyond obvious gossip to subtler forms of negative speech. Sarcastic comments about public figures, dismissive remarks about different lifestyle choices, and the casual cruelty that often passes for humor in social settings. The Stoic approach involves asking ourselves, does this comment honor the dignity of the person I'm discussing, even if they're not present to hear it? Marcus Aurelius understood that our words create ripple effects that extend far beyond immediate conversations. When we consistently choose respectful speech over negative commentary, we contribute to environments where trust flourishes, creativity emerges, and authentic collaboration becomes possible. Conversely, when we participate in gossip and negative speech, we contribute to cultures of suspicion, defensiveness, and superficial relationships. The practice requires developing what modern psychology calls emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize our own motivations while considering others' perspectives and feelings. When Lisa, a teacher in Denver, felt the urge to share frustrating stories about difficult parents with colleagues, she began pausing to ask, "What need am I trying to meet through this sharing? Am I seeking support, venting frustration, or simply entertaining others at someone else's expense?" Often, this pause revealed that her underlying needs could be met through more constructive approaches. Seeking advice about challenging situations, processing emotions through journaling or therapy, or finding positive ways to connect with colleagues that didn't involve negative commentary about others. The transformation from gossip to dignity requires understanding that everyone we encounter is fighting battles we cannot see. The colleague who seems arrogant might be struggling with imposter syndrome. The neighbor who appears unfriendly might be dealing with family health crises. The public figure who makes mistakes might be navigating pressures and challenges we cannot imagine. Epictetus, who understood suffering intimately through his experience as a slave, taught that true strength comes from treating others with compassion rather than judgment. When we choose dignity in our speech about others, we don't just protect their reputations. We cultivate our own character and contribute to communities where everyone can thrive. The sacred trust of human dignity in speech ultimately recognizes that our words have power to heal or harm, to build up or tear down, to create connection or sow division. When we choose consistently to honor others through our speech, we become people others can trust, respect, and turn to in their own moments of vulnerability and need. The daily practice, building your Stoic foundation. As we conclude our journey through the transformative power of Stoic principles, let's take a moment to reflect on the profound insights we've uncovered together. Each section of this exploration has served as a reminder that the path to inner peace, authentic relationships, and personal growth is not a distant destination but a daily practice. The ancient Stoics, through their struggles and wisdom, laid the groundwork for a resilient mindset that remains remarkably relevant in our modern lives. Consider the importance of daily rituals in cultivating a Stoic mindset. Marcus Aurelius began each day with a commitment to face whatever challenges arose, reminding himself that he would encounter difficult people, situations, and emotions. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." By preparing his mind for the realities of human interactions, he was able to navigate social complexities with grace and strength. This preparation is not about resignation or cynicism, but about equipping ourselves to respond wisely. Just as athletes train their bodies daily, we must train our minds to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. As we wrap up this exploration of Stoic philosophy, remember that transformation is a journey, not an overnight achievement. It requires commitment, practice, and patience. Each time you consciously choose to embrace Stoic principles in your daily life, you build a stronger foundation for resilience, authenticity, and inner peace. Now, we invite you to take action. If you found value in this journey, please consider subscribing to the Stoic Viva channel for more insights and practical wisdom. Like this video and share it with others who might benefit from these timeless teachings. Together, we can create a community grounded in Stoic principles, supporting one another in our journeys toward a more fulfilling and meaningful life. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Stoic philosophy. As you step back into the world, remember, you have the power to shape your thoughts, actions, and ultimately your life. Embrace it and remain Stoic.